just fill you with joy hearing that Sega? Okay, so although Sonic is certainly far from the first game released for the Genesis and Mega Drive, it was the first game that I played. On that system, or I'd even heard of. So I figured it was appropriate for this game to be the Genesis of a new series, which is me beating all of the games in my collection for this system. But also, I thought it would be thematically appropriate for this to be the playthrough where I kind of get out of the way like some of the expectations of like what I'm wanting to do with this channel, my presence online in general, but especially these particular videos, and this kind of relaunch, re-entry into, you know, the online video world. I'm going to avoid using terms like content creation or anything of that nature, because I think that is that's very corporate newspeak for just being able to legally say, like, all content on this platform. You know, it's just a very nice way to, like, put everything that gets created by users to a little bow, so that legally it's easier to kind of do what you want with that, you know. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. Like, on this platform, I make videos. I'm not a content creator, and I'm not an influencer. I'm not here to make money. And indeed, coming to that realization has been an epiphany of late, realizing why I've struggled so much in life with trying to integrate what I do creatively into some means of, like, sustaining myself. It's like I've always struggled taking anything creative to, like, the next step, to, like, you know, pursuing monetization, you know, capitalizing on my creativity in some way. It almost, if you were to look back on the events of my life, you'd almost think there was some self-sabotage going on. It's like just kind of balking at the pressure to, like, take anything that I'm passionate about, any art I create, and that I have to, like, capitalize on it in some way. And that, in fact, everything I do needs to somehow generate money, and something about that always bothered me, but it wasn't until I started making these videos that I was able to actually articulate that. That's like, you know, it would be really cool to be able to play video games for a living. And, you know, I still, part of me still wants to be able to, like, with my novels and short stories and everything, to be able to write for a living, even though AI is making that less and less possible by the day. But again, that's another topic altogether. We'll cover that in another video. And I would like for that to be possible, but that's, like, not why I'm here. That's not why I create. If it happens to happen as a side effect, as part of a collaboration, or, you know, what have you, then cool, but that's not why I'm doing this. So why I am at making these videos, because, you know, you can't really throw a pebble on the internet without hitting a Sonic the Hedgehog review, a retrospective, a Let's Play. It's like there's no lacking for any materials related just to this game, much less like the whole franchise, right? So I'm not pretending to break any new ground with the gameplay footage necessarily, or even the parts of this video that will sound more like a review of the game. Because it is kind of a combination of a Let's Play and a review, but more so just kind of expressing my memories with the game, the influence it had on me as a gamer, as an artist, as a young child. You know, playing this for the first time in 1991, when this body was about 5 years old, approximately. And I say it in that way because, you know, their whole being quantum leapt into this body by accident thing, which we'll also get into that story. But I played this game for the very first time at a Meijer. They just randomly had a Genesis hooked up to not even a demo kiosk, it was just like chilling out in the open. Like, I mean, it had some security like restraints, so you couldn't just grab the system off the shelf, but like, yeah, I was just chilling there on a counter basically, and like with the TV, and Sonic hooked up to it. It's like, this was amazing. Like, I had played Super Mario Brothers, and I loved it, and I still love it, but like, this was just like, wow, with like the speed of the game. Like, it sounds trite now, but seriously, at the time in 1991, like, platformers did not move like this. And the colors, and the music, and the, you know, the character just immediately, like, just commanded my attention. And then I got to play again, like, one of my cousins randomly brought a Genesis with Sonic over to my grandparents' house, and I played it again, and it was like, I gotta have this. I'm quite confident that I never shut up about it until my parents finally relented and bought us a Genesis. It had to have been summer of 1992, because Sonic 2 wasn't out just yet. It was on the way. We got the Genesis with Sonic 1 packed in, but there was a voucher you can mail in, and you send it in. Sega would send you a copy of Sonic 2 when it was ready, and they did. And like, so I distinctly remember the day we came home from Paramount Kings Island, which was awesome because back then they had like a Star Trek store, like all sorts of cool stuff related to Star Trek. It's just like amazing. I didn't really care as much about the rides. Some of them were fun, but I was there for Star Trek and candy and whatever else. Yeah, Sonic 2 just waiting on us, like, sent directly from Sega of America. It was like, sweet. I played the crap out of it. And that's all I had for a while. Like, I mean, there were rentals and such, but I can't believe I just did that. And that. Oh well. In all my test recordings before this one, like, I almost had my one credit clear, but there was always, like, just one really silly death because I was trying to do something fancy or something on the fly. I was like, oh, I haven't tried this before. Anyway, c'est la vie. I was used to not having many games. Like, we either rented, didn't really get to borrow that much because most of my cousins and people that I knew had Super Nintendo, so I didn't really have like a pool of Genesis games to draw from. I didn't even know what was really available. Like, I didn't know anything about, you know, Revenge of Shinobi or even Altered Beasts, like, you know, Thunderblade, hang on, like, all the Sega classics. I hadn't even heard of Sega. I didn't know the Master System existed. Like, Nintendo just had, like, an iron grip on the American video game market. You know, commercials, retail presence, like... I mean, there was a reason why they were successful, but, you know, it turns out they were kind of shady as far as the way they did business. And, like, fairness to the competition, yeah. But, Genesis blew all that wide open. Like, in America, especially the Midwest, like, the video game world was Nintendo. Like, you know, Atari had had its day, and they were still somewhat relevant, but, like, Nintendo ruled everything. And then here comes the scrappy underdog Sega with this Genesis, with Sonic, with his attitude. I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. I'm not gonna get into that whole debate of, like, which was better, who won the 16-bit war. As far as I'm concerned, everybody was a winner. Like, that's... As far as, like, you know, head-to-head, like, console war, like, it didn't get better. Like, everybody benefited. Like, I feel like Sega and Nintendo made each other better. The gamers benefited. You know, we got the best of the best of, like, the most brilliant designers, engineers, artists, creators of that time, and possibly still of all time. And both pieces of hardware, like, you can quote statistics, and that is objective, but everything else is, like, they both do things differently and have strengths and weaknesses, and they both can appeal potentially to anybody, but they do have, like, kind of a certain set of people that they tend to more strongly resonate with. I just think it's great. I think that kind of diversity is awesome. But cycling back to my earlier point, you know, I was used to not having many games. Like, for a long time, all I had was Sonic 1 and 2 on the Genesis. And I did get to play Streets of Rage, and it was like, oh wow, this is awesome. Like, Double Dragon's got nothing on this. And yeah, I got to play Columns. At some point, I did play Golden Axe. I never owned it, but I was at least somewhat familiar with it. Didn't bother me to just have a small library of games. Like, we had, what, 6 or 7 NES games at most, and unfortunately one of them was Bible Adventures. Yeah, one of the biggest pieces of crap to ever be disgraced within a Nintendo Entertainment System cartridge, unlicensed though it may be. Or have been, I guess I should say. That's a nice segue into saying that, you know, I think you have probably already gleaned that I came from a very conservative family, especially my, he's chilled out a little bit, but, you know, my father is, like, you know, the most, conservative man to a fault in those days. A story I like to relay is he banned me from watching Captain Planet the cartoon once he got wind of its environmentalist overtones. And, you know, he didn't want me, little old me, to, you know, become an environmentalist. You know, care too much about the planet. See, profit and business success is more important than the planet, right? But the joke was on him, because I was already playing Sonic the Hedgehog, and I was already a budding environmentalist. Save the planet, save the animals. based on how this timeline went, you know, not the one that I'm from, which was more like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure in the future, something went really wrong with this one. Still trying to figure out exactly where, how to fix it. In the meantime, we gotta make the best of it with the means available to us. Yeah, in this timeline, I mean, just look how things turned out between 1991 and 2024. So, okay. I think we needed a little more Captain Planet. I mean, we really need him now, but you know. Now, of course, there was a Captain Planet game. I believe it was NES. I know we rented it, and it crushed my soul with its difficulty, and I literally cried. I mean, I was, what, 6? But we ended up taking it back early. I was trying to get something different. It wasn't as miserably demoralizing. But okay. It's like an invisible wall that forms for some reason. Like, that very rarely happens. But now that I've digressed enough on those silly little tangents, I want to roll back to the purpose of this video. Is like I said, it has elements of a Let's Play, in a review, retrospective, but the most important thing that I want to accomplish with this is having like an archive, kind of like the reason why we used to make home videos before everybody had, you know, stupid slab of glass that they record and broadcast every aspect of their existence upon. It was like, hey, this is a moment that's important to me, and I kind of want to have it recorded for posterity. That's the word. So it comes back to, like, if and when, it's not if, it's when, I'm dead, like, what do I want to survive me? Like, well, moments in time like this, playing one of my favorite games, on my favorite game console, on original hardware, on a CRT, the way it was designed to be in the 90s, like, we can get in the weeds all we want of, like, the proper way to play. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, like, as long as you're not telling people how they should do it, or trying to make them feel guilty for the way they play their games, you know, as long as, of course, we're not talking about them playing it by doing something, like, extremely immoral or unethical or anything like that. But I just wanted to capture as much as possible with the camera and microphone and capture card, like, my experience. It's not the same as being here, you know, being the one playing the game, or even just in the same room watching, but I want to kind of have it archived as much as possible. That was silly. This experience and, like, my memories of the game, what I experienced playing it, just kind of sharing the joy I have. Like, this is, you know, one of my favorite things to do. And I don't necessarily want to be forced to monetize it either. It's like, you know, you hear things like, well, you know, you don't get on Twitch hoping for money. It's like, well, yeah, true. Like, you can tell when people are, like, making things, like, zeroed in on the intent of, like, you know, I need to monetize this. But the thing is, like, platforms like Twitch, YouTube, etc., they are designed explicitly to encourage that kind of behavior. Like, you know, everything about the metrics is all about growing your audience, which is another way of saying grow your business, which they want everyone to do because that grows their business. You know, it creates more ad revenue and sponsorships and other things that make them money. Which, you know, on one hand, I get it. It is a business, and, you know, you have to pay for the servers and everything else that makes the whole platform possible, but there is a big push to turn people who would otherwise just be sharing their experiences and just making things out of passion and love and pure creativity and passion for the arts. Instead, you know, they're under that pressure to, like, no, I have to turn this into a capital endeavor. Like, how do we turn this into a product that makes money? I think that's really sad, and it's taken me so long to figure out, like, this is why I've struggled so much to, like, kind of go above and beyond with the things I've created. Like, the furthest I've gotten so far is with my novels. You know, they're, you know, for sale, and I've made a little bit of money off of them, but nowhere near enough to survive off of. You know, it's just a little extra income here and there. But I also, at the same time, had to break through that mental block of, like, you know, I don't want to cave to the pressure and just put stuff out there like I'm some kind of, you know, factory production line, that I'm just making products to fulfill a quota or to service an algorithm, or, you know, a giant media company that just needs stuff out there to generate sponsorships and drive traffic and all those different things. Like, if I happen to be part of that clockwork by virtue of just sharing what I'm passionate about, then, you know, I guess it's one of those so be it kind of things. But I've got to the point of kind of saying, you know, screw it, you know, I want something to survive me, you know, and YouTube is not invincible or immortal. Like, I mean, they and their Google overlords, like, seem like some invincible monolithic behemoth right now. But, you know, no company is invincible, and, you know, massive corporations have gotten complacent and died before, or been absorbed into something else, so, you know, there's also no guarantee that anything I create here will last forever, but odds are that in some manner this archive that I'm creating will outlive me. And that's ultimately the point, is to just have a chronicle of what I am most passionate about in life, and that the people that I love and care about, and the people that share the same passions and interests as I do, will have something that in some way, even though it's been digitized and compressed and you blasted onto the internet, but it's still something alive, you know, in some way, of me. And I don't want to get too dark here because this is intended to be more fun than anything else, you know, especially this cute and colorful game we're playing, Sonic the Hedgehog. But since this is the first video and, you know, the genesis of the channel and series especially, based off of what I just said, talking about legacy and life and death and all that, it's probably the most opportune time for me to go ahead and just rip the band-aid off and talk about the dark side of that mentality of, like, you know, I want something to live on after I'm dead, and the kind of, you know, live life now, there's no guarantee of tomorrow kind of mentality. Because that's true. None of us have the promise of tomorrow. None of us are infinite, immortal, invincible by any means. However, creatively speaking, you know, that led to an enormous blunder because, you know, I took an opportunity to publish my first book when it wasn't ready. Like, the story was complete, you know, the characters were all set, like, I mean, it's a complete story. And I was still proud of it. However, like, mechanically speaking, it was all over the place. The book needed a lot of work, a lot of editing and polishing, and I wasn't nearly as confident with myself as a writer then, so, you know, I deleted a lot of scenes that really should have stayed, but I didn't really have enough faith in myself that I could make it work. And, you know, I was obsessed with making it, like, you know, fast-paced, breakneck read. So I let it go early, and hugely regretted it. But my motivation, now granted, this was April 2016 we're talking about, right? I was utterly convinced, and that's annoying, okay, that I wasn't going to be here by the same time in the following year. And so I was completely overtaken by the motivation to, it's like, well, I'm probably going to go into the great beyond like my sister did. So I want to have some kind of legacy and leave something behind that I love. So like, well, we'll go ahead and take the opportunity and put my book out now. I, of course, massively regretted it, and I have since released another edition of it that fixed everything that I did not like or I thought was unsound about the initial release, and I'm extremely proud of it, and I'm happy to say that it is the definitive final edition. Like, no other changes need to be made. I can die happy knowing that it's what it should have been all along. And I did it without George Lucasing it. I didn't change the story or the characters or any defining moments. I just cleaned up everything else around it, mechanically. And added back in scenes that should never have been deleted in the first place. But yeah, that was absolutely the wrong mentality to have, the wrong motivation to have, or at least the wrong interpretation of that motivation, we'll say that. Because like I said, it can absolutely be beneficial to live life now and take advantage of your opportunities. Unlike what I just did there. And, you know, take risks now and then, but don't take stupid risks. don't want to be like I was, because things got worse. Like, you know, obviously I'm still here, but as we got into 2017, you know, things got worse, and that negative, pessimistic energy made me a perfect target for an abuser. I ended up with someone who, to use a cliched trope, you know, presented themselves as an angel and turned out to be a demon. I gave up my whole life here. I gave up my apartment, my car, my job, and the career that went with it, because I've never re-entered that field. And I ended up burning bridges that had no good reason to be burned. Not intentionally, but it still happened. I cashed out my 401k. I left behind all of my family, my friends, my life here, all the places I love. I gave up video games. Like, I read my PS3, you know, as a Blu-ray player. Like, I went to another country to be with this person. And they had the gall to say that I didn't know what sacrifice was. Look at that. I beat the boss without touching the water. Some of my Insta friends don't think that was possible. So yeah, that was the most bonehead thing that I've ever done. Also based off that motivation of like, hey, why don't you do all the crazy things in life that, you know, your sister who has passed no longer has a chance to do, or, you know, that you might not get a chance to do ever again. And, you know, things were insane around this time, because, you know, 2016, 17 was a very special time in America. And things were just absolutely uncertain, chaotic. Not that they're much better now, or in any way better, but, you know, that's not something I feel like covering in the scope of this video. But, you know, the promise of being with someone who's like, hey, you know, we're gonna be writers together, we'll live off of our creations, and we'll have the romantic dream, you know, in a country that's quieter, less populated, more peaceful, that's more accommodating for artists and creatives. I gave up my whole life for that person, and you know, racked up credit card debt, even though I couldn't legally work in this other country, to pay for dinners and groceries and gifts for their kid, and you know, all this while I have no income, or barely any income. All I was able to do was write some crappy articles for, you know, a clickbait website, and, you know, I got scolded for not making enough money off of that. I was with someone who wanted to have a partner. It's kind of a trophy to be able to say, hey, I have a spouse. And they just want someone they could mold in their own image and exploit. So yeah, don't do what I did, ever. And to think, I also gave up blast processing for this person. Now, this Genesis was in storage back here in the States the whole time. But since I was chided by this person for partaking in any hobby that, or pursuit that wasn't going to generate money for the household, or somehow benefit them, it was a waste. I didn't need to be doing it. Or it was a foolish, childish pursuit. You know, my books were just called sci-fi silly stuff. You know, video games were for kids. I no longer care about such opinions, but I had to learn the hard way, like, what was most important to me. family, and by family I mean, although some of that happens to include family by blood, it's as much the family of choice. And my art, my hobbies, my individual agency and liberty, so. You can't really put a price on those things. Or your inner peace and mental health. So, have I covered enough different topics with this video yet? They're not all directly related to Sonic explicitly, but yeah, I wanted to really set the stage and kind of get some of the less fortunate topics out of the way, so we can hopefully understand, like, my motivation, what I'm trying to accomplish here. Like, I want this to be a net positive. I don't want my life to be the legacy of all those failures and missteps and mistakes. Like, I mean, it's not that I expect life to be free from mistakes from here on out, that's for sure. That's part of being human, but just not stupidly throwing life and opportunities away, and never losing sight of who you are and what you want to leave behind. So you can be sure I value what I'm doing right here, right now, more than any of those things that I gave this all up for. Hopefully when I die, it will be with the Nomad or Genesis controller in my hand. I know there's more important things in life. And jokes aside, I'd probably rather be, like, looking at the Northern Lights or something like that in my final moments. Or being in space, if we can actually figure out how to get there without killing our planet. And making it possible for more ordinary people to do it and not just the elite rich. We'll see. I mean, if anyone wants to throw me up to the International Space Station, I'll scrub their toilets, I don't care. When you know what was coming and you hit it anyway. Okay, but back to the game, because I actually haven't talked about the game as much as I expected to, or as much as I did in, like, my test videos. Darn it. In said test video, I finished this stage without getting hit, which was pretty cool, but what else? What I really have come to appreciate about Sonic 1 is, even though the Sonic formula and art style and everything else that most people have come to associate with it wasn't firmly established yet, Sonic 2 is the one that really took off with a much more distinct art style, and the gameplay and level design felt more distinctly like, oh, this is the Sonic formula, right? But I like this, even though it's slower. I mean, it's more in line with platformers of the time, even though this was still faster. And what I really appreciate is how much DNA it shares with stuff like Altered Beast, and Revenge of Shinobi, and a lot of the Sega classics from 89, 90, 91. Like, you know, it's not enough that it feels like, oh, it's like a shared universe kind of thing, but it's just like, you can just feel and hear the way it's like, it just shares DNA with the same creative people who made those games, right? It's like, you look at it, you hear it, you play it, and it just, it's like it's part of the same DNA strand as your Revenge of Shinobi, is Streets of Rage, Altered Beast. It's like, what a time to be alive, you know? Especially in Sonic 1, give a lot of people anxiety. Like, I'm sure that the countdown and the drowning sound are triggering to some other retro gamers. But you know what's really triggering to like 5 and 6-year-old me? Like, figuring out all these years later how much more quickly you can get through this level. You just take the correct path. You save yourself so much grief. It used to take me 4 or 5 minutes to get to that last part with the very last air bubbles, and there was just so much anxiety and panic. It's like, oh honey, if only you knew, and were willing to experiment a little bit more. Keeping count. What do we need? One more? Feels like we need one more. We did it! I didn't get the one credit clear that I was hoping for, but it's just me being silly in Marble Zone. But that's Sonic 1. Not that I haven't already beaten this 100 times, or hundreds of times. But look, we got the mega happy ending. There's flowers, and animals, and sunshine, and water, and trees. It's beautiful. We can get this awesome music medley. Starting myself off kind of easy with this journey, but I just thought it was appropriate to begin with my first Sega Genesis game, my first Sonic game, my first Sega game, period, that I ever played, to begin this series. I thought it would be a fun series to do all Segagenesis games, and like a motivation to really dig deep into my library and like finish some games that I either have only done once or twice maybe, or never beaten. So that's going to get interesting. I will play other things, and I'm not necessarily going to wait to play other things until I've finished like my whole Genesis catalog, because that could be a while, and I would like to have a decent variety. But I also don't want to fall into the trap of like, oh, starting yet another creative endeavor and then stopping, you know, by getting discouraged. But like I talked about, there was the pressure of like, oh, this has to like fit a certain mold of success. It has to lead to monetization or some kind of growth of a business, even if it doesn't get directly paid for. But you know, it's... I don't want to get obsessed with metrics, with money. I just want to have my legacy filled with fun, interesting, meaningful bits of media, not content. That's the end of Sonic 1. Take that, Robotnik. And we'll see everybody in Sonic the Hedgehog 2.